Taylor Swift's Reputation, did it change pop music, and are we going to get the re-record very soon? Plus, new Lorde music and an Addison Rae tracklist finally. I am Sam, also known as Pop Sam Cam, and this is the Pop Pod. Thank you for joining me for our new Thursday episodes, which will always focus on a classic album. And classic you can define in any which way, but they have to be something that has shaken the ground a little bit in pop music, and we will get onto that album very soon. For now though, if you love this podcast, or even if you just like it, you should subscribe to it so that you get the notifications each time an episode drops on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. If you could also help us out and rate the podcast 5 stars wherever you're listening to it, it really helps with the visibility. This one's for you though. If you want to join the Discord and come and talk about pop music all the time, you should hit the link in the show notes down below. We're in there talking about new releases, news, all of it, as long as it relates to pop music. Let's get into today's podcast. Lorde will release a new single next week. It's called Man of the Year. It is the opening track of Virgin, and she has given us a little bit of a snippet. Have a listen.
Let's hear it for the Man of the Year. Hear it for the Man of the
This has kind of surprised me a little bit as to the direction of Virgin. I know that What Was That? A lot of people felt melodrama. Well, I'm kind of feeling solar power on this one. The vocal production in particular, obviously the synths are a lot darker, or the guitars rather. I am very excited to hear where she takes this though. It's almost giving the vibe that it could explode into something much different. We'll wait and see what happens with that next week. Next up, Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us has broken the record on the Billboard Hot 100 for the longest charting rap song in the history of the charts.
Sometimes you gotta pop out and show niggas. Certified boogeyman, I'm the one that up to score with him. Walking down whole time, I know he got some hoe in him.
It's now spent over a year on it. It's been a year, if you can believe it, since the beef with Drake that birthed this song Not Like Us, and now it's the longest running rap song. He is also spending, I think, a 13th or 14th week at number 1 with SZA on Luther, so he's kind of a chart king right now, and I think that his album GNX is going to be in with a massive chance at winning the Grammy. If you want to know what I think that could take out Album of the Year at the Grammys next year, that was my Tuesday episode. Just head to the episode just below this if you want to listen to that. Renée Rapp has announced a new album. Her second album will be called Bite Me, and it will be released on the 1st of August. She's released her first single from it, called Leave Me Alone. Have a listen.
I tell you a secret. I'm so sick of it all.
This is obviously quite a directional shift up for Renée. I think Snow Angel was quite heavy emotionally, and obviously a lot of ballads on that record, but this one feels like it's going to shake it up a bit, have a little bit of fun, and I'm totally down for that. I think that this could be a huge era for Renée. Finally, Addison Rae has released the track list for her forthcoming album, Addison. 12 songs will be on the record, and it will include Headphones on Diet Pepsi, Aquamarine, and High Fashion. They are spread across the record. Headphones On is the last track, but I'm really liking some of the track names on this. Life's No Fun Through Clear Waters, which is actually a lyric from Headphones On. Fame is a Gun, Summer Forever, Money is Everything. I feel like this is going to be a very interesting and very well-discussed pop record this year. The discourse is going to be crazy when this one comes out. We will have to wait and see if it delivers on its promise, I guess, of being a really good pop record. I think that it can.
Are you ready for it?
Let's get into the main part of the podcast. I've been kind of dying to make an episode about Taylor Swift that felt relevant in some kind of way, because she's been so quiet over the last couple months, which is not something that we've been used to with Taylor. Obviously, the Eras tour ran for what felt like 10 years, to be honest. And with it came many re-releases and also the Tortured Poets Department, the album. But since the beginning of the year, basically, she's been pretty low-key. And I feel like it's been gearing up to this moment where she is going to release Reputation, Taylor's version. There have been some teasers that she will appear at the American Music Awards and announce it there. I have no idea whether that's going to happen, but because there's something in the air around Reputation, I thought it would be the perfect time to discuss Taylor Swift's Reputation on today's episode of Albums That Changed Pop. It's interesting to think of this as an album that changed pop because I think at the time it felt like it was potentially a little bit of a step down for Taylor Swift. Not in terms of the quality of it, but there was this oversaturation happening just at the end of the 1989 tour, and I feel like a lot of people were starting to get sick of seeing Taylor Swift everywhere. It happens when you're the biggest star in the world. And then, of course, the whole Kim and Kanye drama happened, the Taylor is over party, the snake emojis, the phone call, all of it. I'm not going to go into it at too much detail because by now, surely we are all so well versed on this situation. But it was a pretty torturous time for Taylor Swift and her fans. And this album, by the end of the era for it, while it was hugely successful commercially and the tour was successful as well, I didn't get the feeling that it had had the same impact in pop as what 1989 had had. 1989 had like 5 huge singles. It just felt like she was on a run that could not be broken. And this one was a little bit different to that. The singles didn't hit quite as hard. There were 2 top 10 records from the album, Look What You Made Me Do and Ready For It, that perhaps didn't stick around on the charts as much as the singles from 1989. Delicate ended up being the real winner out of this and spent a very long time on the charts, although it never cracked the top 10. So I feel like her place at the top of the podium felt like it was shaking a little bit by this point. And I think that we see that, particularly when she moves on to Lover, that it looks like maybe her time at the top was over. That, of course, was not the truth because she came back with a vengeance heavy on Folklore and reclaimed it and more with the Eras tour. But I just wanted to set the field for you because in my mind, Reputation is an album that's a little bit contentious. But I think over the past couple years, particularly with the Eras tour, there's been a reclaiming of Reputation, and I always hear when I speak to people now them putting this album at least in their top 3 Taylor records, and I feel like it's for the right reasons. This album does so many things right, in my opinion, and when I talk about albums that change pop, Taylor Swift is pop. So even if Reputation didn't have a seismic shift on the sound of pop at large, even though I do think it had some impact, and we will talk about that along the way of this episode. If it changes something in Taylor Swift's career, it changes something in pop music. And this album changed a lot for Taylor Swift's career. First up, it's the first era she goes into with some kind of huge public backlash. I mean, obviously there've been stuff in the past. People had talked about her relationships. It happened. She's a famous person. But with Reputation, it really felt like she was battling against some really heavy, bad public opinion because of what had happened with that phone call. I also don't think that the backlash to that Kim Kardashian phone call and the whole Taylor and the whole Kanye situation would have been the same if people hadn't been so ready to find any reason to hate her at this point. And that comes because of the overexposure of the 1989 era. I think that she could have played this a number of ways. She could have played it very safe. She could have made a similar record to 1989. She could have gone back to country to try and reclaim her fans there. But instead, she kind of just bulldozes right through all of it and makes this record Reputation, which addresses everything. In fact, I don't think I've known of a pop record to address things like this so explicitly, because Reputation really comes through with the first single, Look What You Made Me Do. And it's very clear from the start that this is addressing the Kanye West situation.
Ooh, look what you made me do. Look what you made me do. Look what you just made me do. Look what you just made me. Ooh.
This album does a lot of different things that I don't think it gets credit for until many years down the track. And that's kind of what the crux of this episode is going to be. But let's just talk about the beginning of this album, because she clears her social media. There were a few stars who had done this in the past. Lady Gaga did it with art pop. Kanye had done it once before, but it was still kind of a rare thing within pop at this time. She clears all of her social media channels, goes blank, and the first thing we hear from her is this video of a snake and this explanation that, well, this caption that there will be no explanation, only reputation. So a very clear move to say that the Taylor that you knew, who was doing press, interviews, talking to fans, all of that kind of stuff, you're not going to see her on this album. She's going quiet, she's going Beyonce, and she is going to let the work speak for itself. Look What You Made Me Do comes and very obviously speaks for itself. I mean, we don't even have to go into that. It's a very different single for Taylor Swift. It's incredibly dark. She follows it up with Ready For It, which once again is a totally different sonic palette for Taylor Swift.
Knew he was a killer. First time that I saw him. Wonder how many girls he had left and left haunted.
It's going into like EDM and trap references that were starting to happen in pop music. Pop music is turning much darker ever since like the release of Lorde's Pure Heroin and the explosion of hip hop, which is happening. It's really at its peak around this time when this album is released in 2017. You've got the whole Migos thing happening at that time. Future is really on top. Rihanna is just a year out, had just made Anti the year before, which is obviously one of her darker records and more challenging records, more hip hop inspired records. And this climate that's happening within pop music really doesn't fit what Taylor Swift was doing on 1989. But she makes an attempt, I think, to fit in with what's happening in pop music, but also makes something that feels quite different and fresh. I think the last time she really tried to do this is on a single like I Knew You Were Trouble off Red, when she takes dubstep and does something with that, turns it into something quite Swiftian. And I think on Reputation, she's doing similar things. She's going into like trap beats, she's going into EDM, she's going into much darker styles, but there's still that Taylor Swift songwriting element to it that is completely undeniable. And I think that you get that when Ready For It switches up from that really aggressive, hard-hitting production and suddenly goes into that really sweet pre-chorus, which is just so Taylor Swift in the songwriting of it. And I really like how she was able to capture a certain darkness without losing the essence of what she is all about. The album comes out. It does exceptionally well. It sells over 1 million copies in its first week. But I feel like the reception is incredibly mixed for it. Critics are very much on the fence. I remember there's this like awkward moment where Taylor Swift starts posting the positive reviews to the album and like taking weird quotes from certain reviews that maybe were a little out of context, because I don't think there was a rapturous applause to Reputation. It was kind of confusion, and I think it also was so outspoken in songs like This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things, Look What You Made Me Do, I Did Something Bad.
They say I did something bad, then why does it feel so good? They say I did something bad, then why does it feel so good?
That some people felt was a little on the nose. And you know what? Even I thought it was a little bit on the nose at the time. This was a difficult record to swallow until we had some breathing space, I guess, and a way to consider the album out of context, out of the heat of everything that was going on. I think the problem is that I've always really enjoyed hearing Taylor Swift talk about her process behind the music. And without having that, we were forced to take it at face value. And some of it felt like overblown in a way that was difficult to connect to. I mean, some of the situations that she addresses in Look What You Made Me Do, and This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things, are just impossible to have any kind of connection to as a normal person if you're not a hardcore Taylor Swift like fan, because I don't think it had that same sort of everyday man connection that some of her previous work had. And she'd done this before. She'd flipped the narratives on songs like Blank Space, but Blank Space was far more relatable in the way that it connected to relationships at large, not just her own. Whereas Look What You Made Me Do and This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things was so connected to the Kanye situation that relatability felt gone. And I think because they were the loudest moments on the album, a lot of the more delicate, excuse the pun, moments on the album were forgotten, or not forgotten, but maybe just not talked about as much because they didn't feel like the billboards or flag bearers for this record. And where this record shines is that it is really soft and it is really vulnerable. And even those big moments where she's kind of playing a character that's bulletproof, when you take those moments as being somewhat unbelievable, I think that it makes this record a lot stronger. To me, she's playing a character in Look What You Made Me Do. I don't think she was in that mental space at all. And we see that on the album that she really was not. She basically retreated, not just from social media, but it feels like she retreated from life for Reputation. And because of that, I think that it leads to some of her strongest work. What happens while she's writing this record is she starts dating Joe Alwyn, her partner for a very long time, right up until just before the Tortured Poets department. And there's this kind of confusing thing where she is ready to retreat, and yet she's going through some of the darkest days of her life. But there's this person who is giving her some kind of optimism and some kind of belief that maybe the mob that's coming for her is not the thing that's important. Maybe it's the connection with these people that are exceptionally close to her. And in that way, Reputation just shines. I mean, call it what you want when she starts it with,
My castle crumbled overnight. I brought a knife to a gunfight. They took the crown, but it's alright.
and then moves into this beautiful chorus that is about falling in love in the face of kind of ruin.
Cause my baby's fit like a daydream, walking with his head down. I'm the one he's walking to.
And obviously that's dramatic and hyperbolic, but that's the way she's feeling about it. She's built up this career. She's used to being totally on the top. And for the first time, it feels like things are not quite right. Things are shaking. But she's found this person, and one part of her life is incredibly good. And to me, Reputation is just such a romantic album in that kind of way, even the way that it ends with New Year's Day. And it's just such a beautiful, intimate moment and vividly captures that point of like cleaning up after New Year's Day, after the party, and having that one person who has stayed this time, like someone who is there, it's company.
There's glitter on the floor after the party. Girls carrying the shoes down in the lobby.
There's just something so unbreakable about that song to me, and really ties up the context so well of when things are falling apart. If you've got that one person to look to, maybe things are going to be okay. New Year's Day is the most optimistic moment on the album, but that's not to say that this album is so like down in the dumps. I think that on Ready For It, I Did Something Bad, Don't Blame Me, she plays almost this gothic character. It's all doom and gloom, and there's an aggression to it that is very intentional. But that is in the minority of Reputation to me. The majority of Reputation is her starting to craft some of her best songwriting tropes that she carries on for records and records, but particularly picks it up on some of Lover's best moments like Cruel Summer. And I think 1989 is where the seeds are planted, but this is where it really starts growing. And when I say this is an album that changed pop, it's because so much of the songwriting that you hear today from people like Gracie Abrams, even Sabrina Carpenter, Olivia Rodrigo, this crop of pop stars who very much place songwriting at the heart of what they do rather than like huge production and stuff. Obviously, they do that as well, particularly Sabrina Carpenter does that incredibly well in terms of theatricality. But I'm talking about just the essence of the songwriting. I think that a lot of it is born from Reputation, particularly a song like Getaway Car.
There were sirens and the beat of your heart. Should've known I'd be the first to leave. Think about the place where you first met me.
Which is where Taylor Swift and Jack Antonoff's partnership really starts to stride. Getaway Car is one of the best songs that she's ever written, I think. They take this 80s synth pop flavor and they create something totally anthemic, but also very intimate. And I think that's one of the great strengths in what Taylor Swift does, is she manages to create these situations that can be explored in arenas, in stadiums. And yet the story that she's telling, the heart of it is so intimate and so insular. And Getaway Car is exactly that. Like, you can imagine them together in that car, but there's emotion and a kind of franticness to it as well that just juxtaposes that situation so well. And part of that is the way that she crafts her bridges from this point onwards. And that is just taking off from the second chorus, from the, I feel like I want to use car references to explain this, but it's almost like a rev. It's an acceleration. And then it just enters another gear when it gets to the bridge and she takes it elsewhere. And I think it's something that she does so exceptionally well on Cruel Summer.
I'm drunk in the back of the car, and I cried like a baby coming home from the bar.
But Getaway Car lays the foundations for Cruel Summer to happen, in my opinion.
We were jet set, Bonnie and Clyde, until I switched to the other side, to the other side.
It's not just Getaway Car that does that. I feel like there's many songs on this that use a similar kind of structure. I think King of My Heart does that. I think that Dancing with Our Hands Tied does that as well. These moments where like everything is moving so fast around you and yet you're zeroed in on this very singular romantic moment. And she is able to capture that very fleeting moment so beautifully on Reputation at so many different points. It's also some of the really downbeat moments that I really love on this. And I think that she finds a maturity within her artistry that she'd somewhat struggled with in the past. I mean, she's always written about pretty mature subjects, but there's always been a youthfulness in the way that she's addressed them. And I guess that's because sex isn't really used in her music so much until Reputation. Obviously, I think that she touches on somewhat sexy moments in 1989, and she's obviously exploring relationships on Speak Now and Fearless as well. But on this one, it's the first time that I can really see Taylor Swift as an adult on songs like Dress.
Say my name and everything just stops. I don't want you like a best friend. Only bought this dress so you could take it off.
Like, Dress is the most kind of sensual that she ever gets, and I think that she pulls it off so beautifully on Dress as well. Dress is one of my absolute favorites on the record. I absolutely love it, and this is a mode of Taylor that I really like, and I group it with songs like False God.
We might just get away with it. The altar is my hips, even if it's a false start.
And also Guilty as Sin off Tortured Poets Department,
What if he's written mine on my upper thigh, only in my mind?
where she's able to kind of like deliver this smoldering mood, but also keep all of her songwriting tropes in check, including incredible bridges, which come across on all of these songs too. I also think Call It What You Want is a song where she does that very well, but she matches the intimacy that she's delivering on that song with more of a context about what is going on around her. And I love that kind of honesty on Reputation. And the album where I think we get this kind of honesty from Taylor Swift again is on the Tortured Poets Department, because she so often is able to block out the circus that is happening around her, because I think that it's so difficult to write about being a woman who is the most famous woman in the world and has millions and millions of fans and essentially can't go outside with being mobbed. Like, how do you write a record like that and make it feel relatable when you're known for being such a relatable songwriter? You just you can't. And that's why she ends up doing something like Folklore and Evermore, which deals more in fiction, because she is able to totally shut out that reality. But I think when she lets it in, even just a little bit, it's when things really get interesting. Like, I think that Call It What You Want is so cool, that she is totally referencing this overwhelming situation that she's going through and able to also zero in at the relationship at the heart of this song. And another song where I think she does this is But Daddy, I Love Him, off the Tortured Poets department,
I'll tell you something right now. You ain't gotta pray for me.
where she finally addresses the pressure, the unfair pressure that she feels from fans to be this godlike figure that only makes the right decisions in relationships and gets everything right. And songs like Call It What You Want and But Daddy, I Love Him are her going like, no, I'm not perfect at all, and I'm not claiming to be. And I also feel that it is unfair, the pressure that gets put on me because of those situations. Reputation deals with that so well. And I think I Did Something Bad even, which is not one of my favorite songs off the record, but I do think that it addresses this situation very well.
They say I did something bad. It wasn't feel so good, so good. They say I did something bad. It wasn't feel so good.
It's her admitting sin, like admitting defeat in some kind of way, and leaning into the darker aspects of her personality, which I think she fully starts to lean into on Reputation and after Reputation. And that just makes her so much more of an interesting artist for me. I feel like there's this goody two shoes kind of vibe that she gives across so many of the earlier records. And even I remember in the documentary when she talks about not getting nominated for anything at the Grammys for Reputation, and she talks about it almost like the teacher has dealt a verdict that it wasn't good enough, and she decides that she has to make a better record because she wasn't nominated for Grammys.
You are not nominated.
Oh, okay. It's this is good. This is fine. You know what? Like, this is fine. I just need to make a better record.
Well, Reputation is a great record.
No, I'm making a better record.
The Grammys being your benchmark for things being good means that there is something really wrong at the heart of the way that you judge yourself, in that you're not judging yourself based on what you and the closest people around you think of the art that you're making. You're judging it based on a basically a board that can only pick one record in each category each year and has a documented history of getting things very, very wrong. And that kind of disappointed me when I saw that clip, because I felt like she would have been able to stand by Reputation much better. But clearly at that point in her career, she was still placing so much value on the opinions of bodies like the Grammys. And I don't think she doesn't place an opinion. I don't think she doesn't place value on them now. I just think that she's grown to a place where she could release an album like the Tortured Poets department and just be totally happy with the fact that she released it. Like, that was never an album, in my opinion, that was going to take out something like Album of the Year or even get like rapturous critical appraisal, but it did feel like something that she really needed to make. And that's, to me, when Taylor Swift becomes a much more interesting artist. And I bring this up in relation to Reputation because, one, she made the Grammys comment about Reputation, so she clearly wasn't at that point by this record, but I think that she's getting there. And I think that this is a major breakthrough and a major breakthrough in her putting a middle finger up to the entire industry and doing what she feels like she needs to do. I don't think Reputation is a safe record at all. I don't think that 1989 is a safe record either, because she was making such a huge genre shift up. But there's something that's way more palatable about what she's delivering on 1989 to what she does on Reputation. And that's what I find so cool about this. And that's what I think is the major breakthrough in her career. It's a risk-taking album. And I don't think that Taylor Swift gets incredible until she starts taking risks. I think that even though they're very different sonically, we need Reputation to get to the point where she could make an album like Evermore and Folklore as well. And also, I think Reputation leads us into her messiest album, but one of her most successful albums, in my opinion, too, which is Lover. I don't mean successful commercially. It's potentially her least successful commercially. But she takes risks all across Lover, and some of them stick and some of them don't. But I start to hear a trademark Taylor Swift sound across these albums, as I said, with songs like Getaway Car and even like Gorgeous on this as well. That I love that she carves that out here. The relationship with Jack Antonoff just builds stronger. The reliance on Max Martin gets less and less. And she becomes a really, really interesting songwriter and artist to watch from this point onwards, in my opinion, a flawed artist. And that is the best thing about Reputation, I think, that we see that. I just want to talk quickly about Delicate as a single, because it was pretty remarkable to me that this was the song that people resonated with.
For the best, my reputation's never been worse, so you must like me for me.
I think people liked Look What You Made Me Do and Ready For It, fans probably, but they didn't really get an amazing reception. Whereas Delicate had this really slow burn, which was testament to the fact that people were realizing the same thing as what I've talked about on this podcast, which is that people realized that Reputation was a romantic record, and Delicate is such a romantic song. I mean, it starts with, this ain't for the best, my reputation's never been worse, so you must like me for me. And that is like the motto of the record. If you could give one lyric to describe the whole of Reputation, it's that very line. And I love that. And I think that's why Delicate had the most success out of all, because it was the most vulnerable and the most plain speaking about the situation at hand. I think with this is a good way to lead into this game that I want to play, where I want to reimagine Reputation with new lead singles, but I'm not allowed to use any of the singles that were released. So that takes out so much of it. It takes out Ready For It. It takes out Endgame. It takes out Delicate. It takes out Look What You Made Me Do. It takes out New Year's Day as well. And maybe Gorgeous too. So many. It takes out Getaway Car. So many of the records are out of play here. But I want to choose a lead single that I think potentially could have done things even better than Look What You Made Me Do. And that is I Did Something Bad, because I love when she plays a character. This isn't even one of my favorite songs off the record. It's in the lower half for me. But the thing I love about what she did on Blank Space is she was like, oh, you want to paint me as the villain? Let me play the villain. And I think I Did Something Bad plays the villain so well. So I feel like I would have gone out of the gates with that. And then after that, I probably would have gone with another song that is not really my favorite, but Don't Blame Me, because then you start to see some of the vulnerability coming through, but it's also got this really widescreen anthemic vibe to it. I feel like that would have been a really nice second single. And then I would have gone straight into Call It What You Want, which I know she did as kind of like a promo single, but this song should have had a proper moment with a video and everything. I think that it is really such a like centerpiece of Reputation and really deals with the themes in the most mature way of any song on this record. So if I had to take out all the singles, I would have done I Did Something Bad, Don't Blame Me, and Call It What You Want as the three to kind of charge out of the gates for this record. Now I'm going to rank, as I do in all of these episodes, my top 3 songs from Reputation. In number 3, I am going to go with Dress.
Inescapable, I'm not even gonna try. And if I get burned, at least we were electrified.
I think that Dress is just a beautiful song. As I said, I love that it's so sensual, and it also isn't as like, it doesn't have the same maximalist production as all the other songs on this album do. And I really like that you get to hear some tones in her voice that you really don't get to hear at so many other moments like prior to this song. So I'm going to put Dress at number 3. In number 2, this is really hard. I feel like I'm going to have to do a tie, and I'm going to do a tie between Delicate and Getaway Car.
It was the best of times, the worst of crimes. I struck a match and blew your mind. Is it cool that I said all that? Is it too soon to do this yet? Cause I know that it's delicate.
Getaway Car for the reasons that I've explained, that it's just so anthemic. It's just peak Taylor Swift songwriting. It is a branch from Out of the Woods, and it leads us on to Cruel Summer. The other song I want to do is Delicate. I've already said how I feel like this is the moment on the album where she really just gives us plainly what the situation is. She's in love, and maybe that's going to be enough to get her through. I love also that it feels delicate. The production feels like brittle in a way that is really beautiful as well. That's my tied number 2s. And in number 1, I feel like this is one that's one that I just personally love, and I don't know if it has the same kind of reputation in the Swiftie community, but Call It What You Want.
And I know I make the same mistakes every time bridges burn. I never learn, at least I did one thing right.
It's just so beautifully written, like so vividly written as well. I love the metaphor that she uses of the castle crumbling overnight, bringing a knife to a gunfight, and then all that sort of doesn't matter by the time you get to the chorus, and she's like calling out to Joe basically that, and it just feels so kind of romantic love story-esque even, but it comes from this place of ruins. It feels like their love sort of rises out of it despite it all, and I think that it is such a brilliant depiction of the album and such a brilliant way to such a brilliant thing to bring in after This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things as well. I think if we focus on songs like Call It What You Want, Delicate, Getaway Car, Reputation gets seen in a totally different way. And I feel like over the past couple of years, it has been reappraised and people have really seen it for what it is now. But it was a totally misunderstood album at the time, partly because of her fault, partly because of the way it was marketed with such aggression and such mystery, when that wasn't really the vibe that the album gives as a whole. Even though I do agree that that made it more of a spectacular, it certainly made it far more interesting to watch at the time. I remember the snake being posted and just being like, what the hell is going on? That is my wrap up of Reputation. I know that if you're a Swiftie and you're watching this, you're going to have a lot of dots to connect for me. You're going to have a lot to say on it, and I would love to hear it. Jump into my DMs or comment down below if you can. If you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify, I think that you can drop a comment. Then suggest an album that I should do next. I would love to hear what your opinions are. We've got a really good lineup of albums to come. Otherwise, thank you for joining me. Don't forget to rate this podcast 5 stars and hit subscribe and join the Discord. There's a lot to remember, I'm sorry, and I'm feeling quite breathless at this point, but thank you for joining me. I will see you tomorrow for Bop or Flop. Until then, have a great day.